Okay, here we go. And we're both recording now, I believe.
Okay.
Let's see, your record icon has not come up yet. There it is. Hey, everything's going good. Here we are. Now we can present ourselves, to the public, and by way of your YouTube channel, which is Pantherism. And I think that it's important to explain what that's all about, from a personal point of view. So I'd like to ask you, Steve Struggle, how it came about that you became who you are. Beginning with high school.
Well, let's just say that, the social struggles in the period impacted me on an intellectual and personal level. And I was convinced at a very young age that the capitalist system was bankrupt, was not worthy of continuing, or at least it wasn't worthy of my support for it or engagement with it or defending it. So from that position, from that time, with the different wars of aggression that France and the United States, with allies from South Korea and other parts of the world, were engaging in the third world, I just figured that it was okay for me to join that movement and not be part of the pro-America, pro-capitalist movement. And that's kind of how it all evolved.
What happened in high school?
High school was just high school. I know that there were newsletters that radical students when they were on campus. The campus newspaper was controlled by the administration, so you couldn't put out any anti-imperialist, pro-socialist, or pro-communist materials on campus. So there were just anti-imperialist or anti-racist organizers on campus who affiliated the different organizations, and that's kind of what high school was about, just trying to get through high school, but also maintaining an anti-imperialist perspective, developing it really, leaving school and visiting organizations and people who were activists within the region, stuff like that.
Were the organizers at the high school, were they also students there?
Yeah, the ones at the high school were all students, yes. All students, yeah.
What kind of tendencies made their impact on you or were attractive to you? What were the newsletters that were being put out?
Well, some were from Marxist humanists, Raya Denayevskaya's group. Some were Black liberationists. Some were kind of yippie-ish followers of Jerry Rubin and Steal This Book approach to life. So, and some were more, I would say, just hippie-ish, anarchist, just clearly anti-establishment with no conservative view of what the correct way of life was, but opposing the current way of life.
What would you advise, high school students who want to organize their place? What should they be doing?
Well, what I think they should go as left as possible in their views that they can understand or appreciate. Let's not conciliate with the Democratic Party, or people who want to be with the Democrats. That's not going to work. Even though a lot of people are connecting with this, there are different movements I find in high school that focus on climate change. There seems to be a rallying cry, like a lot of high school students. And I would call upon them to begin to connect climate change to fossil fuel extraction and to the industries and the system that promotes it. Because the world system is based on fossil fuel extraction, and the current system will tell you that it's going to find a way to make it all right, but they're not going to make it right because their profits are based on fossil fuel extraction, or even if they're able to go to solar, it's all going to be about them making profits. So profits and the capitalist system is their game, and our focus has to be anti-capitalist and anti-profits. And while there are a lot of good people who are students who are focused on this issue, I encourage them to connect the dots between the capitalist and imperialist systems, the banking, the military-industrial complex, and the fossil fuel extraction industries, because those are linked like an umbilical cord to a fetus, and there's no connecting. There's no disconnecting.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. I also would encourage high school students to form links with other high school students and students in community colleges, because they are eventually going to leave high school. So they have to find links with other people who are outside of high school right now. So when they leave high school, they still have connections. So they should have connections with other high school students using WhatsApp and other kind of encrypted media sources, so that the administration at the schools can't be aware of what they're doing. The administration of schools wants to quash any protests that are anti-fossil fuel extraction. They really don't want it around, even though they may act like you have free speech. No, you have to assume that you don't have free speech. You have to assume that you need to learn encryption methods, use digital devices that can maintain your privacy. And you also have to connect with people and other high school students in this country, United States, in the region being United States, Mexico, and Canada, and then globally. You have to do that so that you can see what other people are doing and learn from them. Because if you have an open mind and learn from other students in high school and college, then you'll be able to expand your thinking, expand your movement. So we have to work.
That would certainly accelerate things.
Yeah, it would. It definitely would. Yeah.
There's, you refer to, freedom of speech. There's other rights that high school students, can claim, as I did when I was in high school. There's a freedom of speech. There's freedom of expression, like in a demonstration, and then there's freedom of association. So what we insisted upon in high school is that we had a group of about 8, and we set up a student club inside the school system so we could use the school system's facilities, and so that we could have open access to the students as well. We even had a Vietnam teach-in inside the high school,
right,
with the help of teachers. So that's another sort of organizational platform on which to bring forward the program that you've been talking about, because that's who concerns the most.
Right, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
How did the anti-war movement impact you? What kind of organizational format were you involved in?
Well, the anti-war movement there were mixed. Well, the anti-war movement to me is very important. Be it the war in Iraq, the war in Vietnam, the wars against Grenada, the war against Panama, all of the militarist adventures of conquest and domination by the U.S. military state have all had a impact on me that galvanized my thinking against the system. There's nothing that has occurred that the military does that is correct, just, not brutal, anything. And that's been shown by its history. So the whole, even the persecution of Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, all those actions are against the military. Those are all anti-military actions by citizen journalists, activists, and forces who want a better world, broadly a better world without military aggression and domination. So it's had a central impact on me. And I think that that's one thing that really, that situation, police terror, the genocide against liberation movements and revolutionary tendencies, those have all shown me that the system stinks, and you basically, it can't, if it's reformed, it's just to make sure it's reformed, so it's reformed so it has a different smell. It still stinks, even with the reforms. The
Yeah.
military can't be reformed.
Yeah.
It can't be reformed. It's not that we just hate it because it's not that you hate it because of its armed forces. No, it can't be reformed. It is the armed wing of the imperialist system. That's who they send to do the most dirty of work, the work that is designed to inflict collateral damage on infrastructure, on peoples, on civilizations. There's nothing just about it. Absolutely nothing just about it at all. So the anti-war movement, even though many of them were organized around peace and withdrawal and slogans that literally, I wouldn't say they're meaningless, but literally don't have the tooth that I would want them to have. Anti-war movement was very important in that it focused on opposing U.S. aggression and Western aggression around the world.
Yes. An anti-imperialist movement, in other words. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we had a division in the anti-war movement in Toronto. I think it was elsewhere as well. There was a difference between what was called the peace movement and the anti-war movement, on the other hand. Okay.
Right.
And the peace movement, was, the radical liberals, Christian liberationists, and the Communist Party, basically. And they had, 20,000 people mobilized in Toronto. And then, in the anti-war movement that we organized, including, the high school movement, the Students Against the War in Vietnam, SOV, was, 20,000 as well. And then we met in the middle of the city, and then it was quite impressive. We tried to take the main street, but they brought out the horses against us, and I got stomped on by a horse's hoof on that day, I remember.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was, like it certainly helped to bring about an end to the war in Vietnam. But it was mainly the resistance that brought about the end to the war in Vietnam under General Phan, who on the third offensive, was able to actually drive physically the U.S. military forces out of Vietnam, an incredible accomplishment on the part of Vietnam.
Well, I mean, I think that those victories should be celebrated around the world. And I know that sounds, quote, anti-American, but we shouldn't have been there. You had no business being there. You weren't helping nobody but yourself. So why should I give you any applause? If anything, I should be giving you a middle finger. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'm happy that they won. It was a great day. Whenever we leave, it's a great day.
Yeah.
Whenever the U.S. leaves the country, it's a great day for the world, because the U.S. has no business being there.
Yeah.
Or anybody else, France, Germany, Japan, whoever, they all need to go, because there's this occupying people's places. It's not cool.
Yeah, that's been demonstrated against now in Afghanistan, of course. Similar situation.
Right. Yes. Yeah. The recent trove of documents that most people have not even had a chance to read, because they have to pay $1 to read the New York Times or whatever. It's not free, about Afghanistan. It's appalling. The murders, the destruction, the rape, the torture. Iraq was just a testing ground. Afghanistan was full-fledged, military assault against the population. Yeah. And now the Taliban don't have their money. The U.S. takes their money. What the hell is this? What is all this about? This is their money. You were giving them. Yeah. I mean, I assume it's their money. If not, what's wrong with giving some money? You want to give everybody else some money? Yeah. Want to give, you're tearing the country up, even on the basis of humanitarian, even on the basis of reparations for what you've done. We owe them some money, a whole lot of money for like the next 100 years or so. Yeah. I mean, it's just appalling. And this isn't talked about too much by the left movement. The sanctions, the anti-sanctions movement, the rape and torture and pillage of Afghanistan, of Iraq, of the Middle East, the murder of General Soleimani by the Trump administration. You can't just be killing people.
Yeah.
I mean, who says we can just kill people like this? Somebody says it must be right. And
Yeah.
anyway, but
Yeah.
the anti-war movement has really helped me focus on why the imperialist system stinks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, um, and at the same time, all these Western capitalist states complaining about the migrants who want to come in. And England even left the European Union because they didn't want to have the migrants coming in over the channel, incredible.
That's very
And
interesting.
these
That's very
migrants, these
interesting.
refugees are refugees because of the wars that they started in the first place. They don't make the connection at all. It's incredible, how neurotic, their mentality is nurtured by television and the news
Right.
media. Incredible. Even Al Jazeera is very disappointing, oftentimes in how it adopts, the Western narrative. And,
Yes.
on a world scale, what we're seeing, I think you would agree, is that it's the Western capitalist countries that have invaded the Oriental resource-rich countries. Basically, that's the scenario, and that's been going on
Yeah.
since what, 2001? Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Like, what is this, a
Yeah.
permanent occupation? This is like the
think so.
Crusades, in the past,
Yes. Yes.
Jerusalem
Yes.
was a prize before, now it's oil that's the prize.
Right.
But the same
Right. Right.
methodology. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not surprising that we see jihadist groups popping up of various kinds. The
Yeah.
Taliban are jihadists, but they're not, jihadists in a terrorist sense, and not jihadists in an internationalist sense either, it would seem, because they're just, more of a national liberation movement than anything else. They're not really a revolutionary movement otherwise.
Right. And I think I think that activists should learn from what you just said. The Taliban aren't revolutionary. They simply wanted the U.S. occupiers out of their country.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what can you say to that? Well, you're right. I don't dig where you're coming from, but you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I can't fault you on that one. Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're admirable in that they've unified civil society and overcome any sort of, civil war that might have arisen, with the withdrawal of U.S. troops. So they have a total, cohesive society, coherent society. But they're not taking on, the sources of wealth in society either to alleviate the poverty and all that. They don't even think they have a right to do so, it would seem. They're really naive. Anyway. So the anti-war movement, did it sort of was it a factor in inspiring the development of the Black Revolutionary Movement and the Black Panther Party in particular? Well, there was, other formations before that, SNCC, etc. But as a mass phenomena,
I really think that I really think we need to unearth more about SNCC's anti-war work, because I don't think it's really known that well, and I don't want to say it wasn't exhausted, because I don't know a lot about it. But I know there were some good people in SNCC who went into the Black Liberation Movement, and I know SNCC was against the war in Vietnam. I know that the anti-war movement definitely had an influence on Black Panthers, on subsequent groups like the All African People's Revolutionary Party that Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael led. That's one of the things that I think I also I would think League of Revolutionary Black Workers based in Detroit. I would think that most left of center Black organizations were forced to rethink some of the narrow patriotism, like I served in the Army, that is present within the Black nation. Either people who were recruited, who were drafted, or who may have joined the volunteer army after the draft ended. So you have these guys like Colin Powell was nothing but a killer. However, within some sections in the Black community, he's given lauded because of his service to his country. So I think that these quote service to his country and the fact he rose to a high position within the military industrial complex. So I definitely think the anti-war movement had pushed many people to the left in their thinking. I think it was a good thing. Yeah, I think it was, and to this day, those revolutionary sentiments do distinguish civil rights activism with anti-imperialist activism. It does distinguish those tendencies. I don't know how they're being played out in Black Lives Matter. I would like to know. I wish they were doing much more on that focus, but I'm not sure what they're doing right now. But I do think that movement was very positive. It caused solidarity with the revolution in Algeria, revolution in Vietnam, revolutions in Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, South Africa, Grenada, opposition to U.S. bombing of Panama, these things. So it definitely had a positive impact.
Mm. Currently, what do you think is the most important revolutionary process underway? I'm thinking of Yemen.
You know, I need to learn more about the Houthi movement in general. But in general, I think Yemen is a clear example of how, well, I could say a lot about the Yemen struggle, and I tend to not want to present what I would consider anti-Islamic statements in my narrative. But, you know, Saudi Arabia, the Muslim people, I have to wonder, I mean, what's going on with this? I mean, this is not any way brotherly, just on the issue of just the religion itself. It presents itself as a religion of brotherhood. Okay, I'm not religious, but I can go with that. So how is Saudi Arabia showing brotherhood here? Yeah. They're a terrible country. It's terrible. I mean, it's not even, it's a monarchy. It needs to go. So you have a monarchy imposing death and destruction on a neighboring small country that it wants to control, and it can't win. It's not winning. It's not winning. It's just like U.S. and Afghanistan. Whatever issue people have with Ansar al-Allah, the Houthis, as they call, who can oppose? They're opposing the Saudi Arabia controlling the country. The United States is right there involved, and all the West is right there involved. Israel, UAE, I've heard is involved. You know, so I think it's a very important fight in Saudi Arabia. I think that's an important fight. I also think the anti-sanctions movement, the anti-sanctions fights are very important, especially against countries like Cuba, Venezuela, any other country in the world that the U.S. has sanctions against, that's in the third world. To me, those are the centers of struggle, because that's where the U.S. is actively involved in regime change using economic means. In Saudi Arabia, they're using military means. In Vietnam, and where they have sanctions, they're using stealing people's money, stopping them getting loans. I mean, that's what's happening with Afghanistan, same kind of thing. So I think we have the military in Yemen, the economic hitman approach in other parts of the world. I'd like to see more emphasis given on this, because this is where, quote, our government is engaged in mass murder and inflicting longitudinal damage to a nation. Those nations have a right to reparations from this government for what this government is doing to them. When that becomes a people's issue in the United States, that's when you start having revolutionary change. That says that we, the United States, say, oh no, this is wrong, what we are doing, and we want to end to it, and we want reparations given to these people. The demand comes from us, not from them.
Yeah.
You can't take somebody's money, man. It's just, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever been sanctioned by a bank or by a government just to start taking your money. Yeah. We ain't getting it back. Why? Because I say so. You know.
Well, there'll be a reckoning to come, as one would say.
Yes, reckoning to come. Reckoning to come. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I have a friend of mine, a person I know, who went to Yemen recently to see their relatives. I was like, whoa, hope he come back alive. I mean, he'd hate to say to somebody who's going somewhere, you know. what wasn't because of the COVID. People just get killed by these various factions that Saudi Arabia is supporting. Just because they have murder on their minds. So it's a very dangerous situation, and I think it needs much more attention than it's getting.
Yes, I don't think it's very well known in the American media. Americans are not even aware that there's a war there.
Not really. I mean, not really.
Yeah.
No, not really. Not really. Yeah, no.
It's really strategic. I can see why, the Saudi Arabia, United States, etc., are so desperate, to retain control over Yemen, because Yemen at either end, controls the sea routes, to most of the world's oil.
Well, that's a very interesting perspective we need to talk about more, because it's not talked about, and this year is just starting. We need to make that maybe an initiative we can take care of over the next 362 days. We need a little more on that.
Yeah,
and there are people here from Yemen around the world who can give us firsthand information.
Yeah. And probably, the U.S. military-industrial complex is complicit by selling them the arms to do the war. Yeah.
Anybody selling them arms. Anybody. The United States, Russia, China, France, Israel. Israel has this.
Israel selling drones. Yeah. Britain is selling helicopters or whatever. Like
their blood up to their necks. Man,
it's all complicit. Yeah.
Right.
Now Yemen, if Yemen had control over the straits there, Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea entry point there, that controls the Suez Canal, which Nasser nationalized, and which provoked the Triple Alliance of Britain, France, and Israel, which attacked the Suez Canal and tried to overthrow Nasser, failed. And imagine the control, the geopolitical power that this would present to the third world, because Yemen would be operating on behalf of the third world in effect. So if the United States actually did attack China, as it's threatened to do, any war the United States could start, on a mass scale like that, could be stopped immediately, by shutting down the oil routes, because the army only operates, if there's oil around. The United States has its own oil, but, what are they going to do? Let everybody, starve and freeze? Then they wouldn't last very long, So the geopolitical axis turning point here around Yemen, I think, is very strategic.
Yeah.
And yet we're doing nothing about it so far. So, I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you, and I look forward to working with you to do some education and activism within this area.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of committees around in everybody's area that are part of the anti-war movement, that are not ongoing, not inactive, and they can be activated, even with one person stepping inside, and then pushing it out into the open again.
Right.
Okay, so are there other initiatives underway in your area or in that you're aware of in the United States, that you would like to promote?
Well, I think we always need to be working to get our political prisoners out of jail.
Oh yeah.
I know that the Malcolm X grassroots movement has done exceptional work to keep the African American prisoners, political prisoners of war, in the eyes of activists. We really need to do more around that. I think that the movement around defunding the police clearly has failed, but it wasn't because the movement failed. It just wasn't that movement. The imperialists just simply said, we're going to wait you out and you're going to stop talking about this and we'll just kill it. I think there was an election in Minneapolis, I want to say Minneapolis or maybe Milwaukee, Wisconsin or Minnesota about that issue, and it was defeated. I don't think that that's an issue that should be just left to die. But I do think that there are some contradictions with the whole campaign of defunding police. Because see, the problem with that demand is nothing wrong with the demand, but the police are not going anywhere. They'll just refund it in some other kind of way.
Mm.
So I think we need to review that demand and see what's going to happen with it, because it was raised in the midst of Black Lives Matter movement around George Floyd. So I don't think it's something just to dismiss it. Oh, we just can't do it. But look at it again. I do think the issue of you know, at least within the mass movement, I think supporting anti-imperialist struggles in Yemen and Palestine, and getting a better sense of how liberation movements internally are going to work together and strike blows against the United States imperialist system. There's not much talk about that, but always some occurring on reservations and in like native control areas, around water, around oil, around COVID. These things are going on in a large measure. So I think those are things that we need to kind of keep in mind when we set our targets for activism. And we also need to focus on recruiting. We need to recruit millions of people. I didn't say thousands, I said millions of people into this mass movement, into our movement.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we don't have millions of people in the streets or as members paying dues, doing things in the same way around the country. I know it starts with tens and then hundreds and then thousands and 10,000, but I think our goal should be millions.
Yeah.
If not in every state, at least in some states in the country. And we need to grow our movement and be disciplined about creating a next wave of activism that can last, you know, until the 2050, 2060, 2070. You know, we even have a long-term view.
Yeah, yeah. I would add on to the tools, you know, necessary to fight police brutality. 3 tools. One is, community control over security, so that people know that they can trust, community security more than they can call the police. And so they won't call the police, they'll call community security in order to avoid any outrages.
Right.
Secondly, civilian review board. We can elected civilian review board. Municipality can set up a civilian board, elected civilian board that reviews any complaints against the police instead of the police reviewing the complaints against themselves by themselves. And thirdly, there was a third one. I forget it now, but I think that there's so much that can be done, because there's already been various networks set up between peoples who only lack a program in order to mobilize and continue to mobilize.
Exactly.
So that's, I think that you've got that program, and I hope that people pay attention.
Right.
Okay, very good. Okay, so let's broadcast this, and we will continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your advice.